Hello everyone, how's it going? Welcome to Crack a Pack a Day. Every day, I'm going to open a booster pack of Magic the Gathering cards and evaluate the contents, choosing one of them to take as if I were taking part in a draft, and this was pack 1, pick 1. Today, we're doing something a little different. It's Throwback Thursday, so instead of opening a pack of the current set, we'll be opening a pack from some point in the history of Magic. Today's pack is Return to Ravnica, the first set in the Return to Ravnica block. Whilst the full block could be drafted, drafting Dragon's Maze, Gatecrash, and Return to Ravnica in that order, this set can also be drafted alone. The key thing about drafting this set alone is that there are only 5 guilds featured in Return to Ravnica. Azorius in white and blue, Izzet in blue and red, Rakdos in black and red, Golgari in black and green, and Selesnya in green and white. Any other colour pair just won't have any kind of support. There'll be no mana fixing and no gold cards, so it's essential to stick to one of these colour pairs. Let's open our pack up and see what we've got. Up first, Inspiration, an instant for 3 and a blue. Target player draws 2 cards. Usually, blue gets to draw 2 cards for 3 mana, on spells like Divination. For Inspiration, you're paying an additional mana for the chance to do it at instant speed. Whilst that means you can leave your mana open to cast instants on your opponent's turn, it's also less efficient. Whilst card draw spells are useful, Inspiration is a pretty average card. I don't think it's going to be my first pick. Druids Deliverance, an instant for 1 and a green. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you this turn. Populate. Fogs, cards that prevent all combat damage in a turn, are usually not very playable in Limited, and Druids Deliverance isn't much of an exception. For the most part, you don't want to put a card in your deck that has very limited applications. Essentially at this point, you're paying 2 mana to populate, and that's a little bit expensive. This may have some merit as a sideboard card if you go heavily Selesnya, but for the most part, I don't think it's worth picking. This isn't going to be my pick. Ethereal Armor, an enchantment aura for white. It targets a creature, which gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control, and has first strike. As an aura, Ethereal Armor has one big weakness, that if you destroy the creature as it's being cast, you've just gotten 2 for 1. It is cheap, being only 1 mana, and the upside can be pretty good, if you get a lot of enchantments. The issue there is, there aren't that many enchantments that are worth playing. Ethereal Armor is a bit of a build around me card, and one that you want to see that's open before you start to move into it. If a lot of enchantments are getting passed round, maybe you can move in and start reaping the benefits. For a pack 1 pick 1, I don't think it's worth taking Ethereal Armor. Centaur Healer, a 3/3 Centaur Cleric for 1 green-white. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life. A 3/3 for 3 scores perfectly on the vanilla test, and it comes with an upside, in that you gain some life when it enters the battlefield. On the downside, you do have to pay 2 different colours of mana to cast it, which can make it pretty tricky to cast it on time on turn 3. Nonetheless, Centaur Healer is a very solid card, and is probably the best card in the pack so far. Chemist's Trick, an instant for a blue and a red. Target creature you don't control gets -2/-0 until end of turn, and attacks this turn if able. It has an overload cost of 3 blue-red. I don't really rate Chemist's Trick very highly. For 2 mana, you don't get a great deal. Forcing an opponent's creature to attack, and giving it -2/-0, for the most part isn't worth a card. Even the overload, where you force your opponent's entire team to attack with reduced power, doesn't seem that good. The only time it feels like that would be a really good opportunity is when both players have a bunch of creatures. At that point, your opponent attacks with his entire team, and you can probably eat a bunch of his creatures, hopefully without losing too many of your own. But a card that's only good in the parity situation isn't all that useful. It doesn't really help you when you're behind, and it doesn't really help you when you're ahead. And it's certainly something you don't want to play in the development part of the game. All in all, Chemist's trick scores very lowly in my opinion, and is not going to be my first pick. Seller of Songbirds, a 1/2 human for 2 and a white. When it enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying onto the battlefield. A 1/2 for 3 is very underpowered, but when you take into account the ability, it's essentially a 2/3 for 3. That's a little bit better, especially considering that it's on 2 bodies, which makes it more resistant to removal, and one of those bodies has flying. The fact that it makes a token is very relevant in Selesnya decks. All in all, Seller of Songbirds is a solid card, but probably doesn't have the power to be a pack one pick one. Void Wielder, a 1/4 human wizard for 4 and a blue. When it enters the battlefield, you may return target creature to its owner's hand. On the vanilla test, a 1/4 for 5 is extremely unexciting. He's about half the size he needs to be, but he does have that enter the battlefield ability. Against Selesnya, Bounce can be extremely potent, because if you return a token to your opponent's hand, that token's gone forever. Against the Golgari, it'll remove all the counters that have been scavenged onto that creature. Despite the very subpar body, the ability is very useful, and the 4 toughness is still pretty handy, even at that stage in the game. Overall, I think Void Wielder is a very solid card, and might well be my first pick here. Gatecreeper Vine, an 0/2 plant for 1 and a green. It has Defender, and when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card or a gate card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Whilst it doesn't technically ramp you, what Gatecreeper Vine does, it allows you to hit your land drops on time. If you keep a 2-land hand and Gatecreeper Vine, then essentially you've guaranteed yourself 3 land. The fact that you get an 0/2 blocker afterwards is just gravy. You're never including Gatecreeper Vine for the fact that it's an 0/2 defender, but for the fact that it allows you to get your lands out on time, and that can be a very powerful ability. The fact that it can also get you a gate, which allows you to fix your mana, is extremely useful. Overall, Gatecreeper Vine is a very solid card, and might well be the top pick out of this pack. Shino Racketeer, a 2/1 Shino rogue for 2 and a red. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. A 2/1 for 3 isn't very exciting, and the ability doesn't really help to make up for that too much. For the most part, you're going to want to use the ability later in the game, where you can probably discard an excess land card and hopefully draw into something better. Playing Shino Racketeer on turn 3 isn't going to make you very happy. You'd probably want something a little bit bigger for the mana cost. Overall, I think this is a sub-average card, and it's not going to be my first pick. Chromate, an instant for black. Exile target card from a graveyard. Draw a card. Despite the fact that Chromate is cheap and draws a card when you cast it, the effect is so minimal that it's not worth putting in your deck. To me, Chromate scores very lowly, and is not going to be my first pick. Tavern Swindler, a 2/2 human rogue for 1 and a black, with the ability tap it and pay 3 life to flip a coin. If you win the flip, you gain 6 life. Tavern Swindler is what we call a bear, a 2/2 creature for 2 mana. Bears are usually very solid creatures that go in almost any limited deck. I don't think Tavern Swindler's ability is worth taking into consideration. For the most part, it's a 50-50 shot at whether you're going to gain some life, and in the long run, it's not going to make a difference. As a 2/2 for 2, Tavern Swindler is an average card, so won't be my first pick. Our next card is Lev Sky Knight, a 3/1 human knight for 1 white-blue. It has flying, and when it enters the battlefield, detain target non-land permanent an opponent controls. A 3/1 flyer for 3 isn't too bad. It's a very aggressive card. However, the 2 colours in its mana cost makes it a little difficult to cast on curve. The enter the battlefield ability is probably best when you've got a bit of a built-up board, so it can be a little better late in the game, but you're certainly going to be very happy to see this come out on turn 3. Overall, it's a fairly aggressive card, with a reasonable power level. It might well be my first pick. Zanikev Locust, a 3/3 insect for 5 and a black. It has flying, and Scavenge for 2 black. Whilst a 3/3 flyer is a respectable body, the fact that you're paying 6 mana for it is a little over the odds. Its scavenge ability is quite useful and relatively cheap, so it's possible you're paying a bit of a tax for that. Despite the increased cost, you're probably not going to be cutting this card from any of your decks. It's a relatively solid card, but I don't think I fancy taking it first here. Our rare is Rest in Peace, an enchantment for 1 and a white. When it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from all graveyards. If a card or token would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. In Limited, this card has practically no applications. About the only thing you're going to want it for is against a Golgari deck with a lot of scavenge creatures, but even then, this isn't the best counter to that. Whilst Rest in Peace has applications outside of the Return to Ravnica format, it has very few within them. At best, this is a sideboard card against Golgari, and therefore I'm not going to be taking it first. We also have a dragon token and a forest. Let's have a quick review of what we've got. And here's our pack. Whilst nothing leaps out at being especially great, there are a few solid cards in this pack. In particular, I've got my eye on Centaur Healer, Gatecreeper Vine, and Lev Sky Knight. The issue with the 2 gold cards is that they're sort of forcing you into a colour pair early. On the other hand, the Gatecreeper Vine keeps you pretty open. You've got the choice of going into Golgari or into Selesnya. It also theoretically means you might be able to splash a 3rd colour simply because of its tutor ability. Taking all that into account, I think Gatecreeper Vine is my pick, simply for the fact that it keeps me the most open. And that's about all we've got time for today. If you disagree with my choice, then please let me know in the comments below, on Facebook, or on Twitter. Have a good day now!